Checkout tracking by the NPD Group brings you a receipt collecting system that gathers data anonymously through technology we created, providing your businesses with answers.
So I would like to introduce Blake Commagere with a very aptly titled talk, Fundraising is Fucked Up. Quite a bit of experience in both the great things that can happen when you fundraise and the bad things that can happen with a fundraise. Certainly would love to hear your insights. Okay, here you go.
Great. Thank you. Give me just one moment to drop my timer and that sort of thing. So I have a habit to be chatty, and I want to make sure I get to everything. So real quickly, title of this is Fundraising is Fucked Up. The target audience for this is entrepreneurs that are fundraising. Naturally, if you're not an entrepreneur and you're not going to be fundraising, you're of course, hopefully there's still some interesting things to be learned in the process if you're just curious about it. If you're an investor and you kind of want to hear some perspective in terms of why entrepreneurs are the way they are, you could get a little bit of info on that. It's probably not going to surprise any of you to discover that this talk does contain profanity. I would hope that the title communicated that to you to begin with. So to start it off, I think it's fair to ask, who am I? Since I'm the one pretending I'm an expert and chatting you guys up and telling you how this works. So I've started 7 companies, 5 of which I've sold. During that process, I've raised a little over $12 million at both the angel and the VC level. And I recognize that in this day and age, that's not an enormous amount of money, but back in the day, that was healthy Series A were $3 to $5 million. Now I know that that's almost like angel levels, which is kind of nuts. And in general, my background is I tend to do a lot of consumer-facing stuff. I build things that are viral. I'm one of the I guess I was doing viral marketing back before it was called growth hacking, and which I think is passé as well now. So I'm sure there'll be some new term that is douchey that we all criticize in the near future. But that is one of the things I do. So I was early at the team with Plaxo, wrote and designed the first version of Causes on Facebook, and then a lot of the early social games on Facebook, including the Vampires and Zombies applications. So sorry about that if you were on Facebook at the time. I know that they were quick growing and a lot of your friends probably annoyed the shit out of you with them. But that's the sort of thing I do. I also am very obsessed with human behavior. No formal psych degree, but I spend way too much of my time reading psych studies, and it's the weirdest hobby I know, but it's what I do. I love putting things in perspective in terms of analogies. Dave McClure has a bit of a reputation on the VC side for swearing, so I think it's fair to say that I should compare myself to him. One of my weaknesses as a speaker is that I do use hyperbole a lot, probably more than anyone else on the fucking planet. It's something I'm working on. I recognize that if I say during this talk 3 times, oh, this is the worst thing ever, obviously there are not 3 things that are the worst thing ever. It's just the way I speak. Please go with it. And I appreciate your patience. Most importantly, though, this is for you guys. The structure of it is I've got 20 minutes to chat away, at the end of which you're supposed to get 5 to ask questions. Don't wait till the end. If there's something you're curious about, you want me to spend more time chatting about, raise your hand. I'm more than happy to jump into something that you're interested in. I'll try to keep relatively on topics that's relevant for everybody, but don't be shy. The things I am going to cover is how fundraising is fucked up, why investors are thinking the way they do about it, and very interesting in my opinion is how to mitigate the stress of fundraising and increase your odds of success. These are things that I don't typically see people talking about on the fundraising end, and that's why I like talking about them. I think it's also very relevant to stress what I'm not going to cover. These are things that you can Google and get 100 answers to. You don't need my talk to learn about. If you have no idea what should go in your deck, there's a million talks out there already, tons of people focused on this. Negotiating deal terms is I know something that is very stressful and intense and something that people are anxious about. There's a wonderful book called Venture Deals. If you don't want to spend money on a book, I guarantee you can borrow it from one of your friends. And lastly, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about what to do if your deal is hot. And if your deal is hot, in case you don't know, if your deal is hot, this is what it feels like. It's still stressful, but nobody cares. Nobody. It's like winning the lottery and not knowing who your real friends are. Nobody fucking feels bad for you because you won the lottery. And that's exactly what happens when your deal is hot. You've got Mike Moritz on the phone at 11 p.m. Kevin Afruzzi is calling in from Excel, and Mike from Sequoia is screaming at you, "Don't you dare take that fucking call from Excel. Let's close this deal tonight." Those are the problems you're dealing with when your deal is hot. You really don't have to worry about any of this other stuff that I'm going to be focused on. And you can pretty much write your own rules in that scenario. So first off, how fucked up is it? So one of the things that I've never liked about TechCrunch is that it creates this perspective within the entrepreneurial community around fundraising that is completely inaccurate. It's not unusual for, I'm assuming most everybody reads TechCrunch. If you're too cool for TechCrunch, then you're reading, I don't know, Mashable or something to get your VentureBeat, to get your fundraising news. Whatever it may be, as you get a pulse on Silicon Valley, there's a terrible trend to get this sense that fundraising is trivial and takes absolutely no time. Now, in very, very, very few cases, that is true. And in very, very few cases of successful fundraising events, that is true. But the vast majority of the time, it's not at all unusual to spend more than 3 months on fundraising. It's more common to spend 6 to 9 months on it. And one of the things that is incredibly frustrating to me is that when I talk to so many entrepreneurs, they have this sense of, well, I'm really busy focusing on the product right now, so I'm going to do a little bit of fundraising. I'm going to devote 10 to 15 hours a week to this for a couple weeks, and we'll be done with our Series A and have $5 million in the bank, and it's off to the races. If that's your budget from a time perspective and from an attention perspective, you're grossly underestimating what you're going to have to devote to this process. Now, in the very, very, very rare scenarios where your deal is so hot that you don't need money because you are printing money hand over fist, or your user growth is so insanely radical that you have so many offers and so many investors pursuing you, then of course you can finish this in a couple weeks. But by and large, most people, when they get a successful fundraising announcement and they do have their press around it, it seems overnight to all of us because we're like, oh wow, I just heard of this company. They just raised $5 million. That's amazing. That's great. But they didn't spend 3 weeks on it. Most of the time, they've spent 6+ months on it. The other thing that's incredibly fucked up about fundraising is this is so stressful. It is a distraction from building your company, and there is no other way to think about it. If you only have a limited number of hours in the day, and every hour you devote to the fundraising process is an hour you spend not building your company. Here's the problem, though. Unlike building your product or building your company, you cannot screw up. All right. There's no second place. There's no, okay, we didn't successfully fundraise, but we came really close, so let's keep building the company. You're done. And even more fucked up is that fundraising is usually treated like sales by a lot of CEOs, and that's a huge mistake. Fundraising is not like sales. It is so radically different. Sales has a very, very different structure and a very different set of consequences and behaviors that lead to success. I jokingly point out that fundraising, you're leveraging not sales skills, you're more leveraging the skills that you used in high school to get your first date. Now, I'm assuming, to hold this analogy, you're not captain of the football team, you're not 6'2", you're not tall, dark, and handsome, you're not leader of the cheerleader team and that sort of thing. You're like I was in high school. This is going to shock you guys, but I was not tall, dark, and handsome in high school. I was not captain of the football team. I was not cool. I played chess. I goofed around on computers all the time. I was strapping 115 pounds. Not exactly the most desirable guy in my class. And you have to convince people that you're this amazing, wonderful, great investment. You're this person and this what's a good way to think about it? That you are this, you're going to grow into some, strapping, amazing young man that is marriage worthy. Yeah, that actually happened. Despite her best interests and better judgment. And this is what you're doing. You're not simply selling something. You're not simply like push until I close. You have to be a little more subtle. You have to be nuanced. There's an art to it that is very, very different. And the reason for that is that investors think very differently than you do as an entrepreneur. So one of the things that is difficult, particularly for investors, and I think this is important as you're trying to understand the person you're effectively trying to close a deal with, I think it's very important that you understand their perspective. So it's not unusual for funds to be to the tune of $200+ million. And in that scenario, you have to have huge returns in order for a fund to be valuable. Now, at the Series A stage, picking which companies are going to be wildly successful is tough, all right? One of the things I like pointing out is that if an investor were to say no to people 100% of the time to every single investment that came to them, they would be correct 99% of the time. That's insane odds right there. It is crazy to think that you could be so correct. And there's, if you think about this briefly, if you were correct 99% of the time in your job and you were a complete failure as a result of only being right 99% of the time, that's insane pressure. And that's effectively what these guys are facing. Now, trying to figure out which company is going to become the next Airbnb, the next Facebook, the next Google at the Series A stage is difficult because so many companies are identical in many, many ways at that stage. You have very passionate founding teams, you have very smart people, you have very hardworking people with great ideas. Unfortunately, that's not enough to really narrow the playing field down because everybody is. Think of it this way. If you want to get into an Ivy League school, then you need a 4.0 GPA from high school, right? Without that, you're pretty much fucked. And so many people that are trying to fundraise have this expectation and this analogy that, oh well, I got great grades in school. My ticket to Harvard or to Yale or whatever else is in the bag. Unfortunately, every other applicant is the same. That's not enough to set you apart from the pack at that stage. So in that scenario, investors have to use a different set of criteria to kind of narrow this field down. Known quantities make this way, way easier for an investor. And by a known quantity, think about it this way, because we do this too as entrepreneurs. With two resumes that seem equally promising, you know, in all ways, you could have two applicants that appear identical in terms of, work history and, listed skills. They could interview equally well and seem both like great hires. Now, if one of those was a friend of yours for the last 10 years and you know that they work really, really hard and that they don't lose their temper at work, that they play well with teams and all that sort of thing, and you have no information about the other person other than their references, you're going to go with the person that's your friend. You're going to go with the person that you know. Effectively, and this is one of my favorite meritocracy myths about Silicon Valley, relationships do matter. Knowing investors for years and years makes a huge difference. Now, this is painful because if you're in a scenario where you're fundraising for the first time and you don't know a single investor, you're effectively feeling the pressure to build a relationship in a very, very short period of time. That's not easy. So to that end, Just trust that becoming a known quantity in any way that you can makes this easier for an investor to set you apart from the others. History makes a big difference too. If a founder has successfully built a team, had an exit, and made money for their investors in the past, it's very, very easy for an investor to look at them and say, all right, this person can handle the insane stress of building a company. This person can handle, the multiple personalities that they're going to have on their team and keep them moving forward. They can lead. That sort of information is very helpful because being a founder, being a CEO, this job, there is absolutely nothing else like it. Nothing prepares you for it. You can have a team of 10 people within a large company like IBM reporting to you. That's absolutely nothing like being the CEO of a company with 10 people. Yes.
I really like your comments also hard to say no. Because I think if you can get people to say no, that's more than a yes. Otherwise, everybody just keeps...
Yeah, and I think, and I'll get to that in just one second. Actually, I'll jump right into it. So one of the things that all of these complexities for investors sets up for the audience is that, for the market of entrepreneurs is that it's very difficult, of course, to say yes in this scenario. It's also, unfortunately, difficult to say no. No is an incredibly satisfying bit of feedback to get from investors, but you're not always going to get that. In fact, more often than not, you're going to get a, either a let a thread go cold, or you're going to get a scenario where investors are, we'll circle back with you. We'll keep us in touch, keep us abreast of what's going on with your company, and that's because they don't want to preclude themselves from the opportunity of participating with you later. Now, if you build a business, and I'm looking at time, I realize that I'm going to have to step it up a little bit, so my apologies. If you build a business worth $20 million, that's a lot of fucking money. All right, you should be thrilled. You should be patting yourself on the back. Investors don't care about $20 million companies. I realize there are exceptions to that, like 500 Startups and Dave McClure's approach to doing investments. But the vast majority of VCs don't care if you build a $20 million business, because to them, that's a lifestyle business. That doesn't move the needle for their fund. It was a waste of their time. It absolutely is not interesting to them. And most interesting to me is that, and Jeremy Liu over at Lightspeed has a great post on this, read his blog if you don't already, where he stresses something very, very fundamental to the entrepreneur mindset that is different than the investor mindset, and that is that entrepreneurs have to make fast decisions that are reversible. Whereas for investors, they only have to make a few decisions quickly, and their decisions are not reversible. As an example, if I'm hiring someone, if I don't have the luxury of spending 6 months assessing whether or not they're going to be a good hire. In a market like this, you have to close the deal as fast as you can and say, all right, we're going to pull them onto the team. Now, the beautiful thing is if you later find out that they're batshit insane, you can fire them. It's great. You can be like, oh, this person that seemed amazing was awful. I've got to let them go. Investors don't have that luxury. They don't get to work with you for 1 month, discover that you're batshit insane, and then say, I changed my mind. I want back 99% of my money. They're stuck with you. And so that creates a very different decision-making dynamic for them, because they cannot simply change their mind like you can. And that creates natural tension at the table. You're ready to go. You know this investor is good. You're going to move forward on them, and they need more time. Now, interestingly to me is that this process, this inherent tension between investors and entrepreneurs, where you want to move quicker than they do, creates an enormous amount of stress for you. And this is very natural. You shouldn't feel bad about this. But this is, and yes, I'm a geek. As you can tell, I'm using a step function to describe your emotional state. But this is insanely stressful. If you take a quick look, in month 5, here's an entrepreneur that's about to have all their problems solved because they're about to have all their round closed and their money in the bank, but it feels as though they've made no more progress than month number 2. That's insanely stressful and very difficult to deal with and cope with. That has you grinding your teeth at night. It has you wondering if you're about to have to let your team go. It makes you wonder if you're about to have to go take a shitty job at IBM. This is a better graph, all right? This is, and you'll note that this is no longer, the y-axis is no longer labeled money raised, it's now value from fundraising. So this is what you want to feel. the prior graph is what you're most likely going to feel. So I'm going to talk to you about how do you get from here to here. So this is a very interesting exercise and something that I highly recommend to entrepreneurs, especially your first time fundraising, and that is to write out the value you derive from this process beyond just raising the money. And that can be an enormous number of things. It can be you're learning about competitors. This sucks, by the way, when a VC is like, oh, yes, you're competing with this company. And you're like, I've never heard of that company. So you're a deer in headlights for a moment. But it happens. And the wonderful thing about the Valley is that, you know, if you blow it with Excel and you look like an idiot in front of Google Ventures and Sequoia passes on your deal, there's still an amazing number of top-tier firms out there. So you still have Google Ventures, you still have Andreessen Horowitz, you still have any number of places you can go and make a better impression. Another thing that you can do, and this is incredibly important, is you become better at pitching your company. You're going to be pitching your company forever. You're pitching it to potential investors, you're pitching it again to existing investors, you're pitching it to potential team members, and you're even pitching the company to existing team members after they've come on board. This is a skill that actually is very, very valuable, being able to in a very focused way, sell a person on the vision of the company again and again and again. And I know that you maybe have every intention of making yourself feel like this, but this is what you're actually going to feel. If you can't pull it off, lie to yourself. If you don't think it's valuable to have connections and relationships with the investor community, just keep writing it down, keep reminding yourself that it is until you finally start to believe it. I'm a huge fan of cognitive dissonance, especially in terms of stress mitigation. Use these techniques to remind yourself again and again and again that you are getting value beyond money so that as you invest time in fundraising, you feel as though you're making progress. Now, increasing your odds of success I think are fairly easy. A lot of people don't do this because they're thinking only from a sales perspective rather than a fundraising perspective. But I think that you should absolutely start pitching with people that you don't really care about whether you close the deal or not with. Just like you would with taking job interviews. I'm sure we've all done this before where we've gone on job interviews in places we do not want to work simply because we're rusty. Do the same with pitching. And never, ever, ever let investors know that you're doing that to them. But warm up on some firms that you don't care about. You have to be confident. I'm going to jump into this a little bit more on the next slide, but more often than not, be ready to discuss everybody's favorite topic. So I can tell you my favorite topic. I can probably tell you your favorite topic too. Mine is me and yours is you. An amazing number of entrepreneurs have so much energy. They just want to talk about themselves. They just want to talk about their own business. If somebody wants to spend time talking and spending part of that meeting with you, discussing their own companies that they've started or their own experience with similar portfolio companies, it's amazing how many people fail at actually listening and being a decent listener for others. It is a quick, fast way to build a relationship and make people feel as though you have a mutual set of respect. And so it's amazing that one of the most advantageous things you can do in this ecosystem is to actually be a reasonably good listener and attentive when other people are talking. But so many entrepreneurs fucking suck at it. It's amazing to me. On the confidence issue, this is one of my personal pet peeves. You cannot be confident enough in a pitch. Now, I recognize that doing some confidence techniques like speaking only with active voice can seem very, very overwhelming and uncomfortable at first. You sound like an asshole when you do it. And for those of you that don't remember the difference between active and passive voice, I'll remind you, since most of us probably haven't been in 8th grade in a long time, active voice is when you say things like, I'm going to do this, and we're going to execute in this manner. We will, you're being very active in your verb choice. Passive is when you say things like, we would like to, or we're going to try to do this. The problem with passive voice is that it's a red flag for an investor on the other side of the table, in that when you use active voice, it betrays a lack of confidence around a particular element that you have to succeed in your execution on. And I've experienced this firsthand, where I said something during an investor meeting to the extent of, we're going to try to hire 6 engineers by the end of the year, and this, and I was immediately interrupted with, well, what happens to your product roadmap if you don't hire those 6 engineers? And I had the conversation entirely derailed simply because I used passive voice in one very small, subtle scenario. And the truth of the matter is that it didn't matter whether I hired 5 engineers or 10 engineers. I was absolutely confident in my ability to do so, but because of the word choice I used, the investor thought that there was a good chance that I wasn't going to be able to execute on this, and it betrayed a weakness in the business. And that's their job. They're trying to find out, not, why do I have to, what is it that I have to do about this company? Should I fund it? Should I fund it? They're absolutely looking for, what's the reason I shouldn't fund it? And every single use of passive voice is a great opportunity to tell an investor, you should not fund me. And I realize active voice makes you sound like an asshole. You don't want to speak this way every day, all day. But when you're pitching, do it. Have a friend go through your pitch. Have them call out every use of passive voice until you get rid of this habit, because it makes you sound weak. It makes you sound unsure of your business. Most importantly is following up. This one's hard. Everybody follows up. They want to follow up again and again when they don't hear back from an investor. Naturally, I think there's absolutely a great reason to follow up after initial meeting and thank someone for their time, provide any more material they may be interested in, and try to push the conversation forward. You should never, ever, ever, ever follow up again after that if you don't hear from them. And I realize this is going to go to your head, and it's going to be incredibly hard to remember and think about, but think back to how many times in your life you haven't received an email that someone sent. It doesn't happen. An investor got your email, they read it. If you haven't heard back from them after your initial follow-up, the answer is a no. And every time you follow up with an investor, you're providing them with an update on your company. When you do follow up with someone, I realize you may think like, well, I didn't tell them anything about the company. I was just checking to see, are they interested? What about now? Do you want to invest in my company? You are providing them with an update, and that update is as follows. It's, hey, during the last 3 weeks, I've done nothing but wait for your fucking money. Have you lowered your standards? Are you now going to fund my shitty company? That's exactly what you're telling them with that follow-up, and it's infuriating. So many entrepreneurs do this. And think about it like this. It's you ask someone out on a date and they say, I don't know, maybe, call me. You call, you leave a voicemail, you wait a week, you call again, you leave a voicemail, you wait a week, you call again, you leave a voicemail. This is not the person that's ever going to get the date, by the way. This is the person that couldn't take the hint and that is now lowering their chances of ever being considered again for the dating pool. And that's exactly what entrepreneurs do again and again in this scenario. They keep reaching out, asking, have you lowered your standards? And the answer is no. They haven't lowered their standards. They never do. The one example, the one scenario where you can violate this rule is if you have an update that stresses how much better you are as a company. If you know an investor wasn't particularly thrilled about your user growth and suddenly it started to skyrocket, then yes, reach out, provide them with an update about why the business is better, about why you are a better bet than before. And that's the focus of the talk, the finality. I realize I went a little bit over time. Any other questions, or do we even have time?
We don't have time. Yeah.
We have a little bit. One?
No. Let's do one question.
One question. All right. Anything from the audience I can jump in? I tried to cover a lot in a short period of time, so my apologies. Did that mean I answered all your questions? Because that's amazing. No way. I certainly didn't intend to be that efficient.
Home run.
Well, listen, thank you everybody so much for your time, and I'll cede the podium to the next speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Blake.